Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this little chat about trails and bits and pieces. My name's Stuart Porter. I'm the Business Development Manager for the Hires Department at White Light, and I'm honoured to have such esteemed guests with us this morning. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but there's Tony and Adam. Tony.
I'm Tony Simpson. I am the head of lighting for Culture Creative, and we produce Christmas trails in the UK, Halloween trails in the UK, and lightscape trails in Australia and the US, which are a rebadged format of the trails that we do in the UK, but we have to call them lightscape in Australia and the US. So this year we are doing 26 trails globally.
And I'm Adam Povey, and I hate talking in front of people, but I will try my best. I own my own company and do Christmas trails, which have led into IP film franchise trails and other outdoor Christmas and Halloween events.
Brilliant. So here is just a quick video of what these gentlemen do. Perfect. So we're going to go back to the start and ask, how did you start in this trail industry, I guess? Tony.
Well, I used to work at White Light, and White Light were for many years the principal lighting supplier to Culture Creative Limited for the Christmas trails in the UK. And I got asked to go and put some lights up for a press shoot when Blenheim first started, the trail at Blenheim, which was in 2016. So I spent 2 nights scampering around through the night, lighting trees for a photo session. And then White Light phoned me back up and said, would you go back and do one, which was 2 years later, would you go back and do another one, which was down at Bewley at the National Motor Museum, where they were doing a new trail that year, which was 2018. So I went into the photo shoot and I bumped into the Yeah, absolutely. I'll do it. I had time in my diary. So I did Bewley in 2018. So I sort of project managed it and lit it. And to say it was a bit of a baptism of fire is a bit of an understatement, because it was totally make it up as I went along. In those days, in 2018, we just had 7 trails, I think 8 to 7 trails in the UK. And this was before anything had happened in Australia or the US. So I literally just had a go at quite a small trail. Needless to say, that trail didn't come back. So we did it once and it never came back. Probably to do with the lighting, I suspect. But it was quite an interesting, because it was slightly off the beaten track, it was quite a nice way to start. But by the time you got through the end of a 3-week build and then the run, it became very evident that it's not just about placing light by a tree and turning it on. Actually, there's quite a bit to it. But it was a good way to start. But that's how it started in 2018. As of now, I just got off a plane on Thursday from Australia, where I've just lit the trail in Brisbane. That was my 27th trail design. So I've now had a bit of practice.
Brilliant. And Adam?
It started a long time ago doing outdoor street theatre festivals, which was not really trails, but 15 years ago I used to do all of the street theatre festivals in the UK. And then I did 5 years as head of lighting for Regent's Park Open Air Theatre. And actually, when COVID hit, I'd known the producers of CCL and spoke to a lot of people when all of our work dropped out for 2 years. And they said, actually, we've got Kew Gardens. Do you want to come and light it? Which was still a thing. You could still do trails during COVID. So I did Kew for 4 years. And that led into Warner Brothers and the creative team for Harry Potter, Forbidden Forest, seeing that and then asking me to do the Harry Potter trail which we did in year 1 in Manchester, and then did it in America and Australia and Singapore and around the world. And that's about it, really.
Interestingly enough to point out that 2020, which is the year I did Bewley, the year I went to Stourhead, which is my first sort of trail, which I still do, which obviously was that year of years. Culture Created had a mandate from the Secretary of State at the time, Oliver Dowden, from DCMS, to actually go ahead and do the trails. Central government actually approached RG Live and said, actually, we really want you to put these trails on. We want some events to happen. And because, of course, they're outside, they're outdoors, it's cold, they're one way, you can stagger how people go to them in terms of ticket numbers and when people arrive. And actually, they were almost COVID-proof. And I think that's also attributed quite a lot to their success in other countries.
Brilliante. That was just a little, a few slides for bits and pieces. So now we're going to go a little bit more in depth to what is actually involved in these trails, because I know that they're not as easy as everybody thinks it is. It's not just plonking a park can under a tree and let's go for it. So obviously you've done a large amount of them, but you know, from where you first started in Bewley to where you are now, what have been those technical challenges for you both as you go through? But from both sides, from yours, obviously, Tony, on an artistic side, going through the bits and pieces, and yours from actually the infrastructure and the logistics of getting everything into the place.
Could you go first?
Yeah. I think we were saying earlier, there's the creative side, which is interesting with the both different versions of a trail. The Christmas one is interesting because you get lots of different installations to fit onto your trail, and you have to tie them all together and make them fresh and new each year, whilst keeping companies that you like their work of engaged and moving them around sites. And so from a creative point of view, trying to sit those in the right place and tie them together so that it doesn't feel disjointed as a creative is important. And then the flip side of that on Harry Potter was taking exactly the same creative and putting it into a completely different forest and space, which was interesting because you had to site things in the right location to make it feel like the best trail it could be, and reorder the same content, which is very different to the creative for the Christmas stuff. And then the technical challenges, obviously, it's a 1 to 2 mile long trail, getting power and cable and all of the infrastructure in, even having the right people so that you don't just lose people for a day in a forest, not doing very much. The weather, there's so many factors, and depending on the trail that you're in, queue was open every day when we were installing. Same with some of these other ones. The Potter stuff was interesting because we got to build the trail in most cases, which meant that we could have paths were being put in, so we could put cable ducts underneath them and we could hide infrastructure, because we wanted people to walk into a forest and not see a load of tech kit, speakers and lights. The other ones, we are not so lucky to be able to dig pipes underneath Kew and Blenheim and Windsor and Sandringham. So lots of technical challenges. I think all of it comes down to having ultimately the right people, a couple of which are sitting at the back of this room. But having the right people on board, because it's a very unique and specialist thing, and not a lot of people understand how to install stuff outdoors through winter to last and be the same quality on the last day of the show as the first day. And I think that we were talking about this earlier, but ultimately there's been a boom over the last 5 years in Christmas trails and loads of companies doing it, and the ones that will last and be successful are the ones that have those right people, the right quality of equipment, and that are well installed, and the other ones unfortunately will will continue to fall by. But yes, lots of challenges there.
And I think from the point of view of if you come to see a Sony, but basically what a badge to Sony Music, we are owned by Sony, Culture Creative, RG Live are owned by Sony, Masterworks. And if you come to a Sony trail, what you will see is the thing that should set us apart, and I think a lot of people have followed, is the fact that we use a combination of lighting and curated light art. So we regularly, we come on to collaboration in a minute, but we regularly collaborate with quite a few light art companies that are specialists, there are quite a few of them in France, who are very specialist in an oversized large-scale light art. So if you come to one of ours, what you should see is this journey between lighting and sculpture. And that is all well and good on paper, but as you know, Adam was saying, when you're then dealing with heritage locations, muddy paths, gravel tracks, power, and obviously one of the biggest things of all, even with the evolution and the massive step forwards in LED, and the fact that most of our trails now are almost entirely LED populated, the challenges of actually getting a very, very heavy piece of light sculpture up a very difficult path that's going to require 2 telehandlers to do it, etc. Actually, the infrastructure to deliver these trails actually needs considerable planning. So we're already now, literally just started the 25 planning. So for all of the trails that we're potentially doing in the UK in 25, that planning has started. But power, I think, is also one of the biggest, and biofuel and etc. Where is all of that going? That is, I think, probably one of the biggest things is for us as a challenge as a lighting designer, is then being able to integrate what your lighting kit is in and around these great big pieces of light art that have been put here, put there, and you're sort of joining the dots. But actually, do I need to fill this back palette around this particular sculpture, or don't I? Do I leave it alone and let it do its thing? So artistically, we have quite a lot of artistically, those challenges are technical, I suppose, because it's, do I need more power there because I need more kit?
And the more that people go to them and experience them, the more people demand better next year, and for it to be improved and changed, and the quality to ultimately go up. And and it's trying to now find the next 3 things that are new, and I think because it does involve technical challenge. Like a lot of sites now want immersive, interactive elements to the trail, and we built a wand battle for Potter in year 1, and we thought that it was great, and we tested it, and everyone thought it was amazing. The first audience that we had round, a dad came up and tried to rip the wand off the end of the thing, which had the hand sensors in it, and broke said wand battle. And we obviously were never trying to destroy it in that way in the R&D prototype stage. So I think people are demanding and wanting lots more of those things, and how do you keep that now as a challenge moving on a site like Q, where you don't want to actually stop people for that long. There's a balance of how you keep people moving, but actually how you engage them, watch a little show, move on, and an installation and a piece. And even that level of things is interesting.
I think, as I said to Stuart earlier, actually, and it's a really good point, you could argue that some of the technical challenges are actually how do you manage it? Because actually what we're doing here is, actually, if you want to classify what it is we're doing, we're putting on large-scale temporary visitor attractions. That's the classification, if you want, that these trails fall into. So if you open OneDrive and you go to Blenheim Palace on OneDrive and you open 2024 Blenheim Palace, you will see 24 folders in Blenheim Palace. One of those folders says lighting, because you have to think technically: first aid, event management, blue light routes, traffic management, health and safety, evac plans, and so on and so forth, rubbish clearance. The great British public, if you're putting 7,000 people around a trail one night, leave an awful lot of rubbish. Damn them. And that needs dealing with on a daily basis. Stewards, car parking, one of the people often say, well, how do you work? What's the challenge of working out how to go to that particular venue? Well, actually, apart from Q is a sort of really its own special case because it has become such a destination event for London. But anywhere else, really, the first thing that the producers look at is how many cars can we park? How many human beings will arrive at that space in a car? That's how we work out how many people can go per hour across essentially the length of the event. That then gives you how many people will potentially come. That then gives you the budget. And then the budget for how many bits of very expensive light art can we afford, and therefore how much lighting can we have, and therefore what does the potential outcome of this site look like. So there's very, very clever sort of algorithms at work here. That's what I mean when I go back to it. It is not just putting parkans by trees. The infrastructure technically that goes into putting these on from power and everything else is vast, because we're putting on a temporary visitor attraction, and you have to manage the general public, whether it's parking, whether it's where do they go, wayfinding, how do I get there? What does lighting have to come into that, or will we just have signage? Well, what sort of signage? Is it going to be backlit signage, or are we going to have foam board and we physically light it? Right, I need 400 extra spike lights because I'm going to have to put a load of signage lighting it. Blah, blah. And so it goes on. So actually, the more you sort of unravel the complexity of what it is, it's not the lighting of the objects and the trees and the back palette is actually sometimes relatively straightforward. It's knitting in with everything else and everybody else, and of course there's going to be a finite amount of time that you're then allowed to build this. So that's a big technical challenge.
So just as a general question on that, is there any, on the sites you've both done, is there anywhere where you have started to build what you think is going to be a great display and then had to physically stop and change due to the technical difficulties of that spot that you were going to put that actual site in, or have you had to move anything, or has your pre-planning always come to fruition and you've never had to change it?
Stuff develops along the way. So having done Q for 4 years, the 3 years I've always seen the treetop walkway structure as a big rigging canvas ultimately, and we've usually hung things from it that light up but don't light the structure or show the structure. And so I always wanted to light up the structure. So we got to create a show last year there, a piece called Treetop Rock. And we basically wanted a rock show off of a massive structure that doesn't exist in these trails. And we had to do a lot of what we wanted was lamps up the legs, but it became apparent that we couldn't, in the gaps between the legs, hung. And we developed it for 6 months, and it became apparent that there were only certain ways we could rig lights, and we were very all happy with the show in the end. But what was the original renders and plans of that show was not what we created to start with. And I think there's along the way there's loads of those things that you think are going to be something, and that you just have to adapt when you're on site.
You have to. The lighting plan, I'm afraid, I always say to everybody, it's an indication of what we want to do. So be ready, because we might need more cable. We might need to move it. Oh, no, I didn't mean there. I meant there. And actually, the difference between putting the light there or here suddenly makes a massive difference. So you can't always just expect, I suppose, from a design perspective, you can do the best intention of what you think is required. But actually, when you get to it and you turn the fixture on and you pointed up that tree, there's actually a nasty gash in the tree that you might not have seen before. And actually, because the shadow makes the gash go black, and suddenly, oh no, what have I done? I've lit a horrible bit of a tree. So, okay, we'll strike that and move it and start again, or we'll move to another tree. You have to approach it in that way. There has to be an element, and that's quite difficult, because obviously then, your lighting team are like, yeah, but we've planned for all of this here. But there has to be a level of the plan is the starting point.
It goes back to that the right people. My main point, the right people. Yeah. So when we did, our visas were delayed for Potter in New York, and the wonderful team out there who are now amazing at it laid all the lights out before we landed on the ground, every 5 meters as on the plan. Because we want to light a tree every 5 meters to make sure that there's enough light on the path. But they had literally done that, and there weren't trees in where those lights were. So it was great, but it's that understanding of it's a 2 mile lighting trail on a very big set of plans and paperwork, but that detail doesn't, no one ever, apart from, there's a couple of sites that have got trees on plans which are not entirely accurate but almost accurate, but most places we go to don't have accurate plans of a 1.5 mile walk with all the trees on it.
So, and when you do one of these projects, how big is your team of people? Who and what are their? Do you have people? Do you have to do specific jobs? Do you have generator people? Do you have cabling people, or are they just overall technicians? What staff do you use? You go, right, this trail is going to need this amount of people or whatever. How do you build that up?
Some of them have less staff than others.
And then also maintenance-wise, how you address that issue going forward, because obviously you're going to leave after you've created it, and then who looks after it?
Yeah, there has to be a running team that's all over it. Ultimately, yes, there needs to be a creative team and programmer on the ground, depending on the scale of the project, and then there needs to be between 2 and 15 production electricians, depending on the site. Smiling because Luke's at the back, and Q first year, I think it was just him and James that installed the entire trail in COVID. But yes, I mean, probably like 8 people is a sensible amount of production electricians for a couple of weeks to install a trail. 3 weeks, maybe. You might disagree with that. Yes, and then the power company are usually separate. Rigging usually gets done by separate people sometimes. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting question, because actually, again, as a technical challenge, there's more and more pixel-based products and LED tape-based products are finding their way into these light art sculptures. Actually, once upon a time, these sites would have had a site crew that would have moved the big bits of steel around and helped put them into place and build them, and then the lighting team might come along and do their lights around it. And actually, our production manager is already and I are already in discussion with the fact that more and more of the stuff that we're using is becoming so technical, server driven, etc., networking and blah blah, that in actual fact we're finding more and more on these sites now that actually you really need more and more technical expertise in your team, as much as you do as you need a bunch of guys and forklift licenses to lift stuff off a curtain sider and put it in place and drive it to that side of the site. So I think some of the smaller sites we might do five or six as a lighting team, but it's most of them are pretty much done within 3 weeks, from literally boneyard starting, containers on the ground, build an office, white light delivery or lighting delivery, power, etc. Within 3 weeks they're live and they're open.
And yeah, it's interesting because I'd never really been on the other side of it and creating installations, and been working with these companies that bring you their installation and install it and then leave. And now we are, luckily as a company for 2 years now, creating installations and putting them on sites and leaving them. And actually I feel very nervous or like a protected parent about it. So I want the installation to be the best thing it can be. We had some problems last year at Sandringham with people not necessarily knowing how to fix things, because it's not their installation, it's just the team on the ground. And also at that point, it's very easy with those technical installations to plug in the wrong cable because you think you're trying to fix something and break a load of things that are very expensive as well. So yeah, there's a bit more handover required, or what will happen in the next couple of years is more of the right people needs to be employed for the run of the show. In order to maintain the level of the complex equipment that's about to happen. Gone are the days where we've just put parkans up trees, and now everything will be more detailed, more pixel controlled, more interactive, and require more maintenance.
Perfect. And we're just going to move on now to the aspect that everybody will be asking is the sustainability of these trails and how you've had to approach that over the time.
Well, I mean, I touched on it briefly, I'm sure Adam will, but obviously with the advances in LED, IP-rated LED kit, and it's interesting, once we've done this, I want to go to a few stands, and actually the first question I'll ask is, how much of the stuff on your stand is IP-rated? Obviously, I think in terms of the noticeable differences in power that is required, there's been a sharp decline in obviously for example, the size of generators that we've been using, bio-oil. Hard power is an interesting thing. There are quite a few. I've just come from doing this site in Brisbane, and the entire trail in Brisbane was all powered from the ground, all from the grid. Lamp posts everywhere with a little adapter plate on the bottom, RCD in, an outlet, and we've been using power all the way around the site, powering everything off the lamp posts. So the entire trail is off the grid, no generator. In fact, it's the first trail I think I've done in 6 years where there was no generators at all. And I think if you'd said that to the Botanical Gardens in Brisbane about bringing a generator, they would have probably gone no. But obviously we don't have that facility on a lot of the places and venues that we use in the UK yet. National Trust actually are trying quite hard because 5 of the trails that we still do in the UK are National Trust. But that's also quite a thing in itself in terms of the differences. Kew obviously is our flagship site, Kew Gardens, and they are heavily pushing sustainability and LED and more hard power, etc. But I think that's probably one of the key things going forward, is that where you're trying to do these type of visitor attraction events is where's the power from.
And the interesting thing about the LED, which I just wrote down, which I hadn't thought about before, is more manufacturers are creating even more powerful, brighter LED fixtures, which require almost as much power as PARs now. So there's an interesting balance of
just because it's LED, doesn't
yeah, exactly. Of like what kit do you put on something to try and reduce your loads? And yes, we've almost got the trails to run on generator and battery combo, but it wasn't almost as successful as everyone would have liked it to be. So the batteries, so for example in Texas last year with Potter, the batteries ran everything overnight, so all the control racks were left on and everything else. But it wasn't quite at the point, it's so close, but it wasn't quite at the point to run the trail on when you have 20,000 people on it reliably enough yet. It's getting very close. At which point they'll need a generator and a battery in every location. And when you break those trails down, that might be 2 generator farms, that might be 8 generator farms.
Yeah. What's going to charge?
Depending on how what size of things you can drive in around the trail, really. But yes, yeah, it's becoming there. And then I think the other thing to say is about bats and badgers. It's our favourite. It's our favourite thing.
And I'm just going to throw in light pollution. Light pollution must also be a massive factor in what you do as well.
And I think the ones that plan it well are painful, because all of those things are factored in. There's an eco report, and like for at Kew, all the trees get marked in every year. 50 more trees go on the no, you can't light anywhere near it list, because there might be there might be bats or badgers at the bottom of them, and I think there's an interesting balance there. We were doing a show in Germany, and we ended up not being able to do it because of the eco report said we couldn't light any trees that were bigger than 4 inches in diameter, which for a forest trail was probably not the thing. After a huge amount of money and resources had gone into pushing that trail through. But yes, it is an important thing to talk about. But I think it's very difficult for me to not for me to not get angry about it. But it's important. But we have to just be careful that we don't just slap a sticker on all of the trees and say there might be bats in there, because we can all go around in this room and do that.
I'm going to sound really, really interesting now. But there are 18 species of bats in the United Kingdom.
Please don't.
And Stourhead, down in Wiltshire, which is the site I still light every year, there are 14 of those 18 species of bat registered on that in that location. The protection of bats in the United Kingdom is so serious that it carries prosecutable offence. It's a prosecutable offence to be proven. God, this is interesting, isn't it? To be proven to have actually disturbed or dislodged or prevented a bat from going back to a place that had been evidence that it had been roosting. They are very, very, very protected. On top of which, Stuart just mentioned my favourite thing of all, which is also Stourhead is in an area of outstanding natural beauty, which it also happens to be in Cranbourne's area of light pollution, International Dark Skies Reserved, IDRS. And the International Dark Skies really don't like anything that is focused above horizontal. Festoon, for example. Festoon bulbs emit, a standard festoon bulb will emit 38% of its emission above horizontal. Therefore, the International Dark Skies Reserve made us make, well, I offered to, I suppose, but we made a load of little, White Light made a load of little 3D printed hats to go on every festoon bulb to stop emissions above horizontal in our car park, because in the car park at Stourhead we use a kilometre of festoon. And they were arguing that in actual fact that festoon is a horrible, ugly, ghastly thing, and we'd be much better using self-generating tower lights than having all of the lights focused below horizontal. So that's what I mean. Some of the challenges that come to us, sustainability. Adam's saying about eco reports. All of our sites have a full ecology report, and we are now at a point where, if it then is deemed that we can't put a light on that building, we now get a secondary report done that's CAT scanning and God knows what to actually find out if there is true evidence of historical bat activity or the badgers. But the bats are the ones that are really protected, and it is becoming more of a challenge. And also, we were talking about it beforehand, because we live in also a country with wonderful county councils, all of them seem to have slightly different interpretations of what's allowed and what isn't. But these type of events, in my opinion, are becoming more scrutinised in a way that they certainly weren't when I first did Bewley in 2018. We just went out and we put the lights out and we lit the trees. And I was like, I hope there's no bats in here. No, it's fine. No, don't even think about it. You've got to do your homework, have your survey done, and then all sit down together and go, what can we actually do on this trail? If we went back to Stourhead now as a case study and said, let's do a trail here, no way would we be doing it. But in the last 5 years of my involvement, the changes in ecology, dark skies, area of outstanding natural beauty, really make it quite a challenge.
So, moving on to our next topic, collaboration, which obviously you've got to deal with the councils and all the bits and pieces. You've also got to deal with artists and bits and things. We don't have much time left, but I just wondered if you just talk about the amount of collaboration you have to do to get a trail through. From obviously you have to deal with artists, you have to deal with the local authorities, the bits and pieces. It's a big. It's not just lighting is obviously a lead element of the event, but there's obviously got to be collaboration with everybody else.
There's from a point of view, you obviously have each side as a production manager, each side as a producer, lighting designer, lighting team, but event management. We have to local authority, evacuation plans, blue light routes, traffic management, marshals, car parking, power management, fuel, sound, big things, sound, because all of our trails have a soundscape, sound story as you go round your mile and a half walk. What are the issues with sound bleed? Again, especially if you're in an area of outstanding natural beauty. And then the artists, as I say, for our sites, we're dealing with artists from all over Europe. The differences that have then happened since Brexit, that have put challenges in place with bringing stuff to and from. We've just had a container leave this week to go to San Diego. We've already just sent. They don't start building till middle of October. We've just had our first container leave this week to go to America. And then of course you've got the collaboration between the design of the site and what's lighting going to do. This is why it's a year long cycle. It's constantly going. It doesn't stop. We don't just put everything away in the 1st of January and go, right, we'll start again in September. We couldn't do it.
And I found the Christmas ones slightly easier in a way, because lighting is maybe the main focus. I can say that because that was my job, but they're lighting trails. So whilst we want to pick sound pieces and things that complement the area, ultimately the trail is picked by producers. The route is picked, and we get to create a lighting trail that looks and feels the best for that, and have some say into what installations go in what places and how we complement those and assist those. The collaboration on the IP side of things and on the franchise side of things is slightly more, I found slightly more tiring and tricky. By rights holders and other people that actually don't understand much about outdoor lighting trails. So the collaboration side of things on that element, which is where I think, we were saying is going to maybe go towards on some of these trails, is an interesting thing to get through, because they actually don't have any clue what you're doing until you do it and deliver it.
They don't want to deliver their brand and movie, and they don't mind how you do it. They just they just want it to look spectacular,
and don't understand that something that's put on your desk in an office to look like that doesn't look like that when you're 20 meters away in the dark in a forest with a backdrop lit of trees, and you can never show someone that until you actually do it. And there's 100 trees as a backdrop, which you can't really get through to office in an office.
I think that's a really interesting point. I would just say it's probably out of my background was in theatre and then in corporate event, bit of feature film work. But in actual fact, out of anything of any medium I've worked with lighting in the last 32 years, it is the one medium of lighting where you really cannot tell. You really cannot tell exactly what it's going to be till it's all there. And that is a risk, because we're talking, these sites are not cheap to put on. They're just not cheap. Doing them properly, using the quality of light art that we use and the volume of kit, these are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds to put on these sites. And that is, as a designer, that is one of the biggest sort of nerve-wracking challenges, is the fact that you can, for all of the rendering you can try and do, nothing will actually show you what it is till it's there. So yes, the more practice you've had at it, I think the easier that gets. But that is quite a nerve-wracking element.
It's ultimately pressure and responsibility, isn't it, to deliver?
Yeah. I think that brings us on nicely to where we're headed in what's next and the longevity of going forward. I know you spoke about movies and stuff and bits and pieces.
I think the levels of them are changing at the moment. So things have to look better in the daytime than they've ever looked before, because all of these parks and trails are open. So the installations that are being created now are nothing like what was created 5 years ago. So it should look as good in the daytime as it looks at night, especially on those big open sites. I imagine more interactive, or I believe more interactive and engaging elements will happen on them. And then I think more IPs, and Warner Brothers were excited and are excited about the Harry Potter franchise, but other film companies that are out there and wanting to do things with their brand that they need to keep reinventing, because otherwise the brand stops being the brand. And it's a way of doing it. And then in order for companies to make money, the last thing to say on that is that they have to extend the hours. More of them, I think, will be adapting to become different things throughout the season. So you might be doing something Halloween on the same site where all of your cost and infrastructure goes in, then a Christmas thing, and then a lighted thing that has nothing to do with Halloween and Christmas. And I think those ones that can be flexible like that will ultimately succeed.
And it's a really interesting point, actually, and back to collaboration, is you may come up with this incredible light art piece, lighting install, but actually what does it look like in the daytime? Because actually some venues turn around and go, well, what's that? Yeah, but it's lovely in the dark. Yeah, but we're open in the day. Okay, well, what do you want? Do you want it or not? It's that can become very, very challenging. And I think picking up Adam's point about where next, I think interactivity with the technology, being able to affect stuff as you walk through that corridor or over that load of panels in the floor or whatever, actually starts to have an impact on what's going on, as opposed to something that's just a show in a sense, something that's presented, you walk around, look at it, goes, and it's lovely. Actually, the potential of where the technology is now and where it's going every day, to actually be able to make an event like this where you can get involved with it. But then as Adam was saying earlier, you've got to think about dwell times. If you make something so good that people stop for so long, what happens is with these things, because you're going one way, is you get you get a queue. And then how do you manage a queue?
The pad has to get bigger, right? Like ultimately, we did a shirt queue in my second year, I think, at Temperate House, and everyone stayed there for longer than was planned, and the pad had to increase in size, which was lucky that there was room there for a bigger pad, because if you were on a different site without the ability to do that, then you might be in trouble. I mean, I'm not saying don't do them. It's just actually when you start to pick apart actually what's actively really needed and what has to go in to make something that sets you apart from the rest. The trail in Los Angeles, the second year, the ticket sales were down, and when they did some market research, they were like, well, we've seen it. Why would we go back? Everyone wants something new.
Everybody wants something
every year, which is great, because actually we get to create the next new thing, which I find the most interesting part.
Biggest challenge, yeah.
But comes with a cost.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We've got just a little quick section for if anybody's got any questions for Tony or Adam. We've only got a couple of minutes, so has anybody got anything you'd like to ask?
So what do you find is like the biggest kind of maintenance challenges over
the weather? But if you've got the right people, ultimately it's not a problem. But the weather and flooding and it depends. Again, it really depends on the site. They rocked up in Arley 3 years ago for the first Potter, and after 2 days of heavy rain and being off for a weekend, to find all the lights were a metre under the water. And luckily, because the right team installed it correctly, apart from pulling it all out and drying it off and putting in stuff again, all of the racks, which we learned from doing inside gigs actually, were built off the floor, severely off the floor. But yes, I think weather, trees falling down on stuff, unpredictable.
Wind is a big thing. In one of the early slides, you might have seen a quick video of the mammoth, which was actually a sort of an outdoor sort of holographic projection we did last year at Chester Zoo. We did Chester Zoo last year for the first time, and we did an outdoor 16 metre wide, 8 metre tall holographic screen with a projection, and despite all of the detail from the manufacturer about the wind tolerance, the document we had to make about what would happen in the wind, a rigging team who did the rigging for us had to come back, and we had to literally retrofit a new frame 5 days after opening because the gauze started to tear. And so we went up and worked through the night and put in a new frame that 3 guys could lower it in about 15 seconds. If we got over 30 knots, whatever it was, that kind of thing, you can get caught out with all the planning, with all of the meetings, with all, it's Bewley. I go back to Bewley, my first site. We put a lovely little install down a path, and a week in there was a deluge of rain and the whole path flooded. And we turned around and went, "My God, the path's flooded." And I went, "Yeah,
it's very
it floods down here."
Yeah, they know.
Okay,
it's
thanks.
very rare with the right people that you'll end up closing lots of evenings of trail, and losing shows. It's very rare, as long as you've got the right people on site that can make sensible decisions. But yes, it does happen occasionally. but usually because of the wind. And actually, they can't put people on pass if they think the trees are going to blow down.
Yeah, the National Trust have really, really strict. National Trust have some very, very strict wind speeds. That once it's over that site, the rangers come out and they'll assess, because obviously you can't have trees falling apart. So yeah, wind, weather.
But we don't normally lose power or generators or lighting or sound. So as long as it's installed correctly.
Brilliant. I think that we've reached the end of our allocated time. So I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming in first thing on a Monday morning to come and talk about. But yeah, fascinating. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for coming to watch. Thank you.